Betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. It comes from those you love. For Billie Holiday, this painful truth came through her own mother, Sadie Fagan. While Lady Day mesmerized thousands under stage lights, she didn't know that the person who supposedly loved her most at home was actually her greatest enemy. Sadie was listening to every phone call, reading every letter, noting every secret, and regularly reporting to the FBI. This betrayal lasted 16 years and poisoned every area of Lady Day's life. Lovers, friends, job opportunities. The FBI could interfere with all of them because Sadie was drawing them a map. This is the greatest harm a mother can do to her child, destroying them under the guise of protection. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss all the details of this shocking betrayal story. Because the truths emerging from FBI files about Sadie Fagan show how a mother destroyed her daughter. March 12, 1943, Baltimore. When FBI agent Robert Wilson knocked on Sadie Fagan's door that morning, he had a very clear offer in hand. Sadie was experiencing financial difficulties at the time. Even though her daughter Billie was successful, she wasn't sending her mother money regularly, and their relationship was tense and troubled. Wilson knew this weakness very well because the FBI had been following Billie Holiday since 1939 and were aware of the cracks between mother and daughter. Agent Wilson made this proposal to Sadie. Mrs. Fagan, your daughter is heading down a dangerous path. By singing songs like Strange Fruit, she's doing communist propaganda. We just want to protect her. If you help us, you'll both help your daughter and receive financial support. While Sadie's thoughts at that moment aren't fully known, FBI files show she didn't accept immediately. In the first meeting, she told Wilson she needed to think. However, a week later, when Wilson knocked on her door again on March 1933, Sadie was ready. Recorded in FBI files under the code name Informant S-17, Sadie Fagan gave her first report that day and received $50 cash in return. This was the beginning of a betrayal relationship that would last 16 years. Sadie's first information to the FBI was shocking. Billie would be meeting with a boyfriend that week. The man's name was Joe Guy, and he was a musician. The FBI would use this information to threaten Joe Guy and make him distance himself from Billie. After this first report, the relationship between Sadie and the FBI became systematic. Every first Monday of the month, Wilson or another agent would visit Sadie, get the previous month's information, and make a cash payment. Initially $50 monthly, the payment eventually increased to $200 minus, quite a high amount for the 1940s. For Sadie, this money wasn't just extra income, but a source that elevated her standard of living. FBI files had notes describing Sadie as cooperative and detailed. These praises showed what a productive informant Sadie was. The relationship between Sadie and Billie had never been easy. When Billie was born in 1915, Sadie was only 13 years old, still a child herself. Billie's father, Clarence Holiday, had abandoned young Sadie, and she had to raise a child alone in Baltimore's poorest neighborhoods. These hardships had hardened Sadie and created a distant mother toward Billie. During childhood, Billie was often left with relatives while her mother worked in other cities for long periods. These early separations had opened deep wounds in Billie's soul. Even more painful was that when Billie was 10 years old, she was sexually assaulted and then forced to work in a brothel. During this traumatic period, Sadie couldn't protect her daughter, and according to some sources had even turned a blind eye to the situation. Years later in her autobiography, Billie would say this about her mother: "Mom loved me, but she never knew how to protect me. Maybe she was so busy protecting herself that she had no strength left to look after me." The pain in these sentences showed how fragile the mother-daughter relationship was. Even after Billie became famous, their relationship didn't improve. Sadie had become financially dependent on her daughter, but at the same time displayed an attitude that envied her success. During periods when they lived together, there were constant fights. Sadie didn't approve of Billie's boyfriends, criticized how she spent money, interfered with her lifestyle. Billie's close friends described Sadie as controlling and bitter. This tense relationship had prepared perfect ground for the FBI to manipulate Sadie. Sadie's first reports to the FBI seemed relatively innocent: where Billie worked, who she saw, what songs she sang. However, over time, the reports became increasingly intimate. In an FBI report from May 1944, these lines appeared. According to Informant S-17's report, Subject Holiday is currently in close relationship with Tallulah Bankhead. The two women frequently spend time together, and the relationship is assessed to be romantic in nature. This information came directly from Sadie. She had disclosed the most intimate detail of her daughter's private life to the FBI. Even more shocking was that Sadie listened to Billie's phone conversations. An FBI file dated 1945 clearly stated this. S-17 has the capability to listen to subjects' phone conversations and routinely reports these conversations. This meant that Sadie was deliberately listening when Billie was on the phone and taking notes of important details. A mother listening to her daughter's phone conversations for espionage purposes showed how deep the dimensions of betrayal were. Letters were also among Sadie's espionage tools. Sadie would open and read letters arriving at the house. Love letters from boyfriends, intimate notes from friends, job offers, nothing escaped Sadie's eyes. FBI files stated S-17 regularly examines subjects' correspondence and transmits relevant information. Billie's private space at home had been completely violated, and it was done by her closest person. 1947 was a turning point in Billie Holiday's life. That year she started using heroin. For many years, the reason for this addiction wasn't fully understood and was seen as Billie's personal choice or environmental pressure. However, FBI files released in 2015 revealed a shocking detail. Sadie had given detailed reports to the FBI during the period when Billie started treatment with Dr. Martinez. More importantly, Sadie had actively encouraged this treatment process. In FBI files was a note dated January 14, 1947. This sentence was horrifying because it implied that Sadie had deliberately directed Billie to a doctor who would make her addicted. Sadie had told Billie she found a good doctor for back pain and had taken her to Martinez. Billie had trusted her mother's advice. How could she not trust? Would a mother want to harm her child? But the truth was much darker. Dr. Martinez was one of the FBI's cooperating doctors and was giving Billie heroin under the name of painkillers. After the first doses, Billie began to become addicted, and her life spiraled out of control. Sadie continued to silently report to the FBI during this process. Subject's medication use has increased. She's taking 2 doses daily. Her behaviors have become more erratic. These reports were as if talking about a stranger, but it was her own daughter. The most painful detail was that Sadie tried to control Billie more by using this addiction. In FBI files was Sadie's suggestion that we can use subject's medication need as a leverage point. In other words, Sadie was suggesting to the FBI to use her daughter's heroin need to manipulate her. This was the most ruthless thing a mother could do to her child, using addiction as a weakness point. There were many people in Billie Holiday's life, but none stayed long. Boyfriends would suddenly become cold, friends would distance themselves, friendships would break. For years, this was seen as Billie's difficult character, addiction problems, or the loneliness created by fame. But in reality, behind these were the information Sadie gave to the FBI and the FBI's interventions based on this information. The Joe Guy example was the clearest proof of this. Billie was in a serious relationship with trumpeter Joe Guy in the early 1940s and was even considering marriage. However, the relationship suddenly deteriorated and Joe unexpectedly distanced himself from Billie. Years later, Joe Guy would say in an interview, 2 FBI agents visited me. They said I needed to stay away from Billie, otherwise I'd be arrested on drug charges. My fear and that threat ended our relationship. So how did the FBI know that Joe Guy was in a relationship with Billie? From Sadie. She had mentioned it in the first report. The John Simmons case was even more tragic. Billie had married bass guitarist John Simmons in 1948. The marriage was initially happy, but FBI archives had reports that Sadie gave about this marriage. Sadie had reported that Simmons was negatively influencing her daughter, gambling, and untrustworthy. The FBI used this information to pressure Simmons, and the marriage lasted only a few years. After the divorce, Billie had told friends, "I can't trust anyone. Everyone leaves me." She didn't know that behind this abandonment was her own mother. Female friendships were also Sadie's targets. Billie's close relationship with Tallulah Bankhead was one of the most detailed subjects in FBI files. Sadie was reporting when the two women met, what they talked about, even what they ate together. This information was material the FBI would use to blackmail Billie. In the 1940s, homosexual relationships weren't legal, and disclosure of this information could end Billie's career. Sadie was putting her daughter's most intimate secret in danger.
The biggest question was this: why was Sadie Fagan doing this? Was the money she received from the FBI sufficient explanation? Or was there deeper hatred? Psychologists and historians debated this question for years. Psychologist Dr. Jennifer Morrison from Columbia University said, "Sadie's behavior is a classic case of resentment, buried anger." She envies her daughter's success. She wants the fame and money that she has. Some of Sadie's comments in FBI files supported this theory. In a 1945 report, Sadie was quoted as saying, "Billie wastes money, doesn't know its real value. When I was her age, I was struggling with hardships, but she finds everything on a silver platter." These sentences were full of jealousy and anger. Sadie saw her daughter's success as something she didn't deserve. However, the money factor couldn't be ignored either. The FBI's payments to Sadie increased over time, and Sadie became dependent on this money. In the 1950s, she was receiving $200 monthly, a good income for that period. With this money, Sadie was living comfortably in Baltimore, buying new clothes, participating in social life. She would tell friends, "My daughter sends me money." But in reality, the money was coming from the FBI. This situation made Sadie even more dependent on the FBI. She knew that if she stopped reporting, her income would also stop. Perhaps the most painful truth was that Sadie had convinced herself she was doing this betrayal for her daughter's good. FBI agents constantly gave Sadie the message that we're protecting Billie from dangerous people and the wrong path. Sadie was perhaps lying to herself, saying, "I'm doing a good thing." This kind of self-deception mechanism was the classic way to reduce guilt. But the result didn't change. Sadie was destroying her daughter. Until 1956, Billie Holiday didn't know that her mother was working for the FBI. However, that year, she unexpectedly learned the truth. Billie's close friend and pianist Mal Waldron told this moment. One day, Billie came home very upset. She said, "Mal, my mother betrayed me." When I asked, she didn't explain, but there was such pain in her eyes that I understood. Something big had happened. How Billie learned the truth isn't exactly known, but the most common theory is that one of the FBI files accidentally reached her. When Billie was arrested in 1956, her lawyer was able to see some FBI documents, and in these documents were reports from an informant coded Informant S-17. The documents were very detailed, information that only someone very close to Billie could know. It didn't take long for Billie to decode the codename S-17, combined Sadie Fagan's initials and the date 17, her birthday. After learning the truth, Billie's relationship with her mother completely changed. She no longer let Sadie into her house, was cold during phone conversations, stopped sending money. Sadie initially didn't understand what was happening or pretended not to understand. However, in 1957, when they spoke face to face, the truth spilled out. When nurse Margaret Davis visited Billie in 1959, Lady Day had told her, "I asked my mother, 'Why did you do this?' She said, 'I was trying to protect you.' Protect? She destroyed me." After this confrontation, Billie didn't forgive her mother. In the last 3 years of her life, she saw Sadie very little, and when they did see each other, she was distant. In Billie's 1959 diary was written, "How is it possible for a mother to sell her daughter? Does she love money that much, or hate me that much? Both are killing me." These sentences revealed the pain inside Lady Day. The betrayal wound never healed. FBI files released in 2015 under the Freedom of Information Act fully revealed the dimensions of Sadie's betrayal. Archivist Jennifer Walsh was shocked when she found these files. There were over 300 pages of reports, and all signed Informant S-17. Each report contained a detail of Billie Holiday's private life. This was systematic espionage, and the source was her own mother. What was most surprising in the files was how detailed Sadie's reports were. Not just who she saw, but what she talked about, how she felt, which songs she sang, even what she ate was recorded. For example, a 1948 report, subject appeared depressive today. At breakfast, she only drank coffee. In the afternoon, a call came from Tallulah. The conversation lasted about 20 minutes. Subject was happier after the phone call. This level of detail was information that only someone living in the house could give. Even more shocking was that Sadie actively made suggestions to the FBI. Files had Sadie's reports titled, "Methods that can be used to keep subject under control." Sadie really was working like an FBI consultant, not only providing information, but also suggesting strategy. One report stated, "Subject's weakest point is fear of loneliness. If we distance the people around her, she'll become more controllable." A mother had written this sentence about her own daughter. The FBI's payments to Sadie were also recorded in detail in the files. From 1943 to 1959,
a total of $38,400 in payments had been made, approximately $400,000 in today's money. These payments were made in cash, and Sadie would take them in exchange for a signature. With each payment, a note was made that Sadie had provided satisfactory information. The FBI viewed Sadie as one of their most valuable informants. Duke Ellington and Louis Armstrong were closely following what was happening to Billie Holiday. Both knew how the FBI was monitoring black artists, but the fact that Billie was being sold by her own mother particularly shocked them. When Duke Ellington visited Billie in 1956, he had warned her, "Be careful, Billie. The FBI has someone on the inside, someone very close to you." Ellington's warning raised the question of how he had information. In Duke's personal diaries was a record where he touched on this subject. "The FBI also contacted me. They wanted me to give information about Billie. I refused, of course, but then I learned that others didn't refuse. The most painful part is that her mother sold her." Ellington had probably gotten this information from a source inside the FBI. At that time, some FBI agents sympathized with black artists and secretly warned them. Louis Armstrong had also had a similar experience. According to Pops's manager Joe Glaser, the FBI had also approached Armstrong in the 1950s and asked for information about Billie Holiday. Armstrong had firmly refused and told Glaser, "I'll never sell my friends." But when Pops heard that Billie's mother had done this, he was very upset. In a 1958 letter, he had written to Billie, "Dear lady, if what I heard is true, I can't even understand the pain you're going through. How does a mother sell her daughter? But know that your friends are always with you." This incident created a wave of fear throughout the jazz community. Artists could no longer even trust their own families. The FBI's manipulation tactics were so sophisticated that they could use even the closest people. In an interview, Lena Horne said, "What happened to Billie was a lesson for all of us. Now we can't fully trust anyone." The paranoia environment created by the FBI had also damaged the natural trust relationships among artists. When Billie Holiday died on July 17, 1959, Sadie Fagan was 57 years old. She attended her daughter's funeral, but spoke very little at the ceremony. Billie's friends treated Sadie coldly. Most knew the truth. After the funeral, Sadie returned to her house in Baltimore, and from that day on, led an isolated life. FBI payments had also stopped because there was no longer a subject to report on. Whether Sadie felt regret in her final years is debatable. Her neighbor Martha Williams said in a 1970s interview about Sadie, "Sadie changed a lot after Billie's death. She became withdrawn, spoke very little. Sometimes crying sounds came from her house late at night. One day I asked her, 'Are you okay?' She just said, 'I'm a bad mother.' I didn't ask what she meant, but the pain in her voice was obvious." However, Sadie never openly confessed her relationship with the FBI. Until her death, she kept this secret, or at least didn't share it with the public. It's rumored she indirectly implied it to only a few close people. In 1975, when Sadie fell ill and was in the hospital, she asked a nurse, "I did very bad things to my daughter. Is forgiveness possible?" When the nurse asked what she had done, Sadie didn't answer, but tears streamed down her cheeks. Sadie Fagan died on October 27, exactly 16 years after her daughter's death. Her funeral was modest. Very few people attended. None of Billie's former friends came. Her gravestone only said Sadie Fagan, 1898 to 1975. Her request to be buried with Billie was denied. It was revealed that in Lady Day's will she had written, "I don't want to be in the same cemetery with my mother." Even in death, Sadie was separate from her daughter. Today's psychologists study the Sadie Fagan case as a classic example in maternal betrayal literature. Family therapist Dr. Rebecca Morrison from Yale University says, "The Sadie case shows us that the deepest wound in the mother-child relationship is the violation of trust. A child learns to open up to the world by learning to trust their mother. When this trust is broken, the person's entire relationship template breaks down." Several psychological theories are proposed to explain Sadie's behavior. The first is vicarious achievement jealousy. Sadie felt unsuccessful in her own life and saw her daughter's success as a reminder of her own failure. Dr. Morrison explains, "Some parents feel threatened rather than proud of their children's success, because this success shows they didn't realize their own potential." Sadie fell into this category. The second theory is learned helplessness turned aggression. Sadie had experienced traumas throughout her life, became a mother at a very young age, struggled with poverty, was abandoned. These traumas made her angry and defensive. Sadie found something she could finally control in her uncontrollable life, her daughter's life, says Dr. James Chen from Harvard. FBI cooperation gave her a sense of power. For the first time, she could control things. The third theory is the self-justification spiral.
When Sadie gave the first report, she perhaps saw it as a small betrayal, but after each report, she had to justify herself. After the first betrayal, turning back becomes difficult, explains Professor Angela Davis from Stanford, because turning back means admitting your first betrayal was wrong. Rather than facing something this difficult, it's psychologically easier to continue and convince yourself I'm doing the right thing.
The Sadie case wasn't an isolated incident. The FBI applied similar tactics to many Black artists between 1940 to 1960. Documents revealed in the 2018 documentary FBI's War on Black America showed that the FBI systematically targeted artists' inner circles. Family members, spouses, managers, even household workers were manipulated by the FBI. The Paul Robeson case was another example of this. One of the famous singer and activist Robeson's close friends was working as an FBI informant. Nina Simone's manager also gave information to the FBI for a period. James Baldwin's publisher was pressured by the FBI. This systematic approach was part of the FBI's COINTELPRO program, counterintelligence operations. The FBI's logic was this: Black artists had the power to influence the civil rights movement. Songs like Strange Fruit could mobilize public opinion, spread the spirit of protest. Therefore, the FBI wanted to neutralize these artists. Direct arrest wasn't always possible. It would create public backlash. Instead, isolating artists, weakening them, making them addicted, and ultimately silencing them was seen as a more effective strategy. Using family members like Sadie as informants was the key point of this strategy. Family members are the most valuable informants because there's both a trust relationship and physical access, explains historian Professor Michael Torres from UCLA. People like Sadie provided gold-level information to the FBI, and the artist never suspected because the source was their mother. These manipulation tactics are seen as methods that today's oppressive regimes also use. After Billie Holiday learned of her mother's betrayal in 1956, her music changed. The pain in her songs deepened, her voice became more fragile but equally powerful. Musicologists say there's a noticeable difference in recordings from 1956. The Lady in Satin album was the masterpiece of this period, and every song in it was filled with the pain of betrayal. I'm a Fool to Want You was particularly meaningful. When Lady Day sang this song, it was as if she was addressing her mother. I'm a fool to want you, to want a love that can't be true. These lyrics actually described love for a mother that wasn't reciprocated. Musically, Lady Day's performance in this song was her emotional peak, her voice cracking, trembling, but every word loaded with deep pain. Don't Explain also took on new meaning. The song was actually about cheating, but Billie's interpretation was, Don't explain, I know you're lying, but it's easier to pretend. Could she have been saying these words to her mother? Don't explain, I know you're lying, but it's easier to pretend. Perhaps even after learning the truth, Billie wanted to give her mother a chance, but at the same time she knew the truth. The most striking was God Bless the Child. Billie had written this song in 1941, inspired by her mother constantly asking for money. The song's lyrics were, God bless the child that's got his own. These words described Billie's financial dependency relationship with her mother, but also her desire for emotional independence. After 1956, when Billie sang this song, it carried different weight. She was now really trying to become independent from her mother. When FBI files and Sadie's informant status were made public in 2015, modern artists experienced great shock. Beyoncé shared a long post on Instagram that Billie Holiday was sold by her own mother deeply shook me. As an artist, my biggest fear is that my loved ones won't support me. But being sold to the FBI by your own mother, this is an unimaginable betrayal. That Lady Day continued making music despite all this pain is an incredible show of strength. Alicia Keys made a more personal comment. I'm a mother, and I tried to understand what Sadie did, but I couldn't. How can a mother destroy her daughter instead of protecting her? This story shows me that Lady Day was not only a victim of the FBI, but also of her closest person. Her music becomes even more meaningful. It's the voice of someone who lived that pain. Kendrick Lamar placed the Sadie story in a broader systemic context. The FBI used family bonds to destroy the Black community from within. They manipulated Sadie, gave her money, made her the FBI's weapon. This isn't just a mother's betrayal. It's an example of how the system tore apart Black families. Similar tactics are still being used today. Lamar's comment went viral on social media, and the Sadie case became part of current political discussions. Did Billie Holiday ever forgive her mother? This question is debated among historians and psychologists. In Lady Day's 1959 diary were conflicting emotions. In one place she said, "I'll never forgive my mother. What she did is unforgivable," while in another place, "But she's still my mother. I don't want to love her, but I do." This contradiction showed how complex the mother-child bond was. Psychologist Dr. Rebecca Morrison explains, Billie showed a classic trauma victim response. On one hand, anger and hatred. On the other hand, love and attachment. Reconciling these two feelings was nearly impossible. Billie wanted to forgive because it could give her peace, but forgiving also seemed like legitimizing the betrayal. During Billie's final hospital days when her mother came to visit, there was a brief conversation between them. Nurse Margaret Davis described this moment. When Sadie came, Billie looked at her for a long time. She asked why. Sadie couldn't answer. She just cried. Billie held her hand but didn't say anything. Maybe there was nothing left to say. Was this final contact a moment of forgiveness or just a farewell? No one knows exactly. Some experts think Billie partially forgave her mother. Billie understood that Sadie was also a victim, says Prof. James Chen from Harvard. The FBI had manipulated her, deceived her with money. Sadie was at a weak moment, and the FBI used this weakness. Billie could see this, but this truth didn't reduce the pain. This was the difference between forgiving and understanding. Billie could understand, but forgiving was something else entirely. After Sadie's FBI informant status was revealed in 2015, no official apology or statement came from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This silence angered civil rights activists very much. NAACP President Cornell Brooks said, "The FBI systematically destroyed Billie Holiday. They followed her, bought her mother, manipulated her doctor, turned her life into hell, and now the evidence is there, but they don't even apologize. This is unacceptable." The Congressional Black Caucus requested an official apology from the FBI in 2016, and the clearing of Billie Holiday's name. In her statement, Representative Barbara Lee said, "Billie Holiday was one of America's greatest artists. The FBI portrayed her as a criminal, destroyed her life, even used her mother against her. Now we know the facts. The FBI must apologize and honor Lady Day's legacy." However, this request went unanswered by the FBI. Former FBI agent and whistleblower Robert Thompson spoke on this matter. "It's not surprising that the FBI doesn't apologize, because apologizing means admitting that what was done at that time was wrong, and this admission can pave the way for other compensation lawsuits. The FBI institutionally doesn't prefer to be accountable for the past." Thompson's comment revealed the systemic lack of accountability. The Sadie Fagan case holds an important place in family therapy literature. Today's therapists show this case among examples of toxic parenting. The Sadie case shows us that the parent title doesn't automatically give the right to trust, says family therapist Dr. Maria Santos from UCLA. Some parents harm their children, intentionally or unintentionally, and as a society we have difficulty accepting this. The Sadie case created special pain, especially in the Black community. Black families are already under systemic pressure, explains Dr. Santos. When threats from outside are already abundant, betrayal from inside becomes even more destructive. The Sadie case triggered trust issues in Black families. In many therapy sessions, patients tell their own family betrayals by referencing the Sadie story. Psychologist Dr. Jennifer Morrison, who works on mother-daughter relationships, says, "The Sadie case teaches us that maternal instinct isn't universal. Some mothers, for various reasons, can't treat their children well. Accepting this truth is painful but necessary." In Morrison's clinic are many patients trying to cope with Sadie-like mothers. "My patients say, but she's my mother. How can she be bad?" The Sadie case shows them that unfortunately it's possible. Today, Billie Holiday is remembered as one of the biggest names in music history. But Sadie's betrayal always exists as a dark shadow of Lady Day's story. At the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's Billie Holiday exhibit, Sadie is also included, but critically. The exhibit text reads, "Sadie Fagan, Billie's mother, was a complex and tragic figure. By working as an FBI informant, she seriously damaged her daughter's life." In modern biographies, the Sadie case is no longer hidden. Julia Blackburn's 2005 book With Billie describes Sadie's informant work in detail. "While telling Billie's story, we couldn't ignore Sadie," says Blackburn. "That betrayal shaped Lady Day's life. In every song,
every relationship, every fear. Sadie's shadow was there. Sadie's grave today isn't visited. Very few people even know where it is. Billie's grave is a pilgrimage site for music lovers. Every year, hundreds of people visit Lady Day's grave, leave flowers, sing songs. The gravestone reads, Billie Holiday, 1915. These words are seen as an indirect reference to her relationship with Sadie. God bless the child that's got his own. Because Billie hadn't received that protection from her mother. Sadie Fagan's story isn't just a mother's betrayal, it's also the story of how the system destroyed black artists from within. The FBI achieved their goals by manipulating weak individuals like Sadie. They may not have directly killed Billie Holiday, but they slowly exhausted her, isolated her, made her addicted, and the most effective weapon in this process was her own mother. Today, Sadie's name has become synonymous with betrayal. In music history, being like Sadie is the biggest insult. It means betraying your loved ones. But at the same time, Sadie's story is a warning. The system's power can contaminate even individual relationships, can destroy even the most sacred bonds. Even the mother-child relationship, seen as universally sacred, can be poisoned with sufficient pressure and manipulation. Billie Holiday's voice is still being listened to today. Her songs are still being sung. Her story is still being told. But now in that story is also Sadie's betrayal. A dark, painful but real piece. Some of the pain in Lady Day's music came from this betrayal. And perhaps this pain was what made her voice so powerful, so touching, so immortal. Billie Holiday was alone, betrayed, abandoned, but she still sang. She sang Strange Fruit. She sang God Bless the Child. She transformed all her pain into music, and this transformation was the most powerful answer to a mother's betrayal. Immortal art.